Ricky McGee's story doesn't begin with a map, a compass, or some clean survival lesson. It begins with a man opening his eyes in the heat and realizing the world around him makes no sense. Dirt in his mouth, dry air scraping his throat, a body that feels heavy and weak at the same time. No road signs, no passing engines, no shade wide enough to trust. Just the Australian outback stretching in every direction like it has all the time in the world. He would later say he woke up disoriented, far from help, with only fragments of memory and a rising understanding that whatever had happened before that moment no longer mattered. What mattered was water, movement, and whether he could stay alive long enough to figure out where he was, and that answer was nowhere near him. The outback doesn't rush you. It strips you down slowly. Daylight presses on your skin until sweat disappears before it can cool you. The ground burns through thin soles and bare flesh. Distance plays tricks. A line on the horizon looks close enough to reach by afternoon, then stays there for hours like it's laughing at your legs. At night, the heat drops away and the land turns hard and cold. Every sound feels separate. Insects rasping in the dark. Wind brushing dry grass. A body trying to sleep while the mind keeps asking the same question in circles. How did I get here? Ricky McGee would survive in that country for 71 days in 2006. And if that number sounds impossible when you first hear it, it should, because the first days alone were brutal enough to break almost anyone. Before he became a survival story, he was just a man on the move. He was traveling across Australia, headed toward work, carrying all the ordinary assumptions people carry when they start a long drive. You picture a vehicle, a road laid out in front of him, heat shimmering above the asphalt, fuel stops marked by habit and timing. Nothing about that scene suggests a man about to vanish into one of the most unforgiving stretches of land on Earth. January 23rd, 2006 wasn't meant to become a dividing line in his life. It was supposed to be another date on the calendar, another leg of a trip, another day to get through. Then something happened out there along that route. And the strange part is that even after Ricky staggered back into the world alive, not everyone agreed on exactly how his nightmare began. Some accounts say his car broke down. Some say he picked up a stranger. Some say he believed he was drugged and left for dead. The details around that beginning have always carried questions, and those questions followed him long after the dust settled. But the survival story doesn't depend on every missing piece at the start. What matters is where he ended up. Far from help. Far from roads he could identify. Far from a version of life where trouble means making a phone call and waiting. However it began, he came to in the middle of the Australian interior with almost nothing, and the land didn't care whether his memory was clear. The sun was already up. The thirst was already there. The body was already failing. And his first real decision was whether to panic or move. He moved, not because he had a plan, but because standing still in a place like that can feel like agreeing to disappear. He started walking, trying to find a road, a track, any sign of something human. At first, survival is almost simple in a cruel way. Don't stop. Keep looking. Scan the distance. Listen for engines. Save your strength. But simple isn't easy. Heat fatigue blurs judgment. Each step takes a little more than it gives back. Bare ground tears at your feet. The light gets so strong it flattens everything, and the world begins to look empty even when it isn't. Somewhere inside that first stretch of wandering, hope still probably felt practical. He must have thought somebody would pass through. Somebody would notice. Somebody would come before the body started cashing in its reserves. But out there, hope can dry out faster than a puddle. Water became the first obsession. Not food, not shelter, water. The body can argue with hunger for a while. Thirst is different. Thirst narrows the world until every thought leads back to it. Your tongue feels too large. Your lips crack. You swallow and get nothing from it. Ricky later described drinking from dams and water holes, taking whatever he could find, and in the stretches before he found them, the need for moisture pushed him to the edge. It's one thing to talk about survival in broad strokes. It's another to imagine a man walking through brutal heat, trying to keep his head clear while his body pleads with him to lie down. The land offered no mercy speech, no warning, no dramatic music. It just kept shining. And after water came the next reality he couldn't outrun. Food in the outback isn't a meal. It's a test of how badly you want tomorrow. Ricky survived on whatever he could catch or force himself to swallow. Frogs, lizards, snakes, insects, edible scraps of plant life when he could find them. This wasn't some polished wilderness demonstration where a host explains calories and protein under ideal camera light. This was a man with no kitchen, no tools worth bragging about, no certainty that what he found today would still be there tomorrow. The taste hardly mattered after a point. Texture mattered. Strength mattered. Whether chewing was worth the energy mattered. Survival strips away preference until the body and the mind make a quiet bargain. Don't ask if it's good. Ask if it keeps you moving. And even when he found enough to eat, another fight was waiting for him at sunset. Outback nights carry a different kind of punishment. After the hammer blow of the daytime heat, the temperature falls and the body, already burned through from effort, has to deal with cold. That's where shelter becomes more than comfort. It becomes proof that you're still thinking, still adapting, still refusing to hand yourself over. Ricky built makeshift shelter from what he found around cattle country and abandoned structures. At one point, he used a feed trough, flipping it over and turning it into a rough humpy near a dam. Picture that for a second. Not a cabin, not even a tent, just a hard little pocket scraped out of the landscape. Mud and metal and stubbornness, barely enough to keep off the weather, yet suddenly the most important place in the world because it meant he had made one small corner of the wilderness answer to him. That shelter changed the rhythm of his days. Survival always gets quieter once the first frantic movement stops. The panic doesn't vanish, but it settles into routine. Wake up weak. Find water. Search for food. Protect the little energy that's left. Crawl back into shade. Wait through the hottest part of the day. Venture out again when the light softens. Repeat. The strange thing about long ordeals is that they aren't made of constant drama. They're made of repetition. The same thirst. The same dirt under your fingernails. The same careful counting of effort. The same questions with no one to answer them. That's where endurance becomes something almost invisible. Not bold. Not loud. Just a man choosing, again and again, not to quit before the next sunrise, even as his body started to shrink around him. At first, he probably believed rescue was close. That kind of hope can keep a person sharp. Every distant sound feels like a vehicle. Every aircraft overhead feels personal. Every gust of wind that carries an unfamiliar noise makes the heart kick. You can imagine him stepping out from his rough shelter, staring into the distance, waiting for an engine to resolve into something real. But false hope has a cost. Every day, nobody comes, the body gets weaker, and the mind has to do extra work not to collapse inward. He later said that in the beginning he thought he'd be found any day. That belief is almost easy to understand. It's the belief that comes after that one which tells you who you are. Because when days turn into weeks and still no one appears, the question changes from when am I getting out to how long can I keep this up? Time itself started to bend. Without clocks, without routine voices, without work, traffic, or human interruption, days stop arriving in neat packages. Morning becomes heat. Evening becomes a chance to move. Night becomes waiting. You try to count, then lose track, then start again, then give up because the counting only reminds you how long you've been alone. Ricky later said he was off by days when he was finally found. That makes sense. The human mind is built around markers, and the outback had stripped most of his away. What stays in a person then are smaller anchors. A patch of ground near the dam. A repeated path to water. A crude shelter you recognize by touch in the dark. A private set of habits that become your whole civilization. Still, even those fragile anchors were threatened by what the land was doing to his body. The weight came off him in a way that must have felt unreal. He had once been a big, solid man. Over the course of those weeks, the outback pared him down. Muscles burned away. Strength leaked out of ordinary movements. Getting up took planning. Walking took grit. Bending down for water or food wasn't a casual motion anymore. It was work. People later described him as skeletal when they found him, a walking skeleton, a human frame wrapped in exhaustion. That description is dramatic, but it only hints at the lived reality. Imagine feeling your own body turning unfamiliar, clothes hanging loose, knees and hips jutting harder under the skin. The effort of standing making your vision flash at the edges. A body can become a stranger long before it gives out, and Ricky still had more ground to cover. He didn't stay in one place the whole time. There were stretches of walking, searching, deciding whether the next water source might be better, whether a sound in the distance meant help or wasted effort. At one point, he moved on after hearing planes, driven by the idea that if aircraft were near, people couldn't be far behind. That decision cost him more energy. He passed out at times from heat and dehydration. He cut his feet. He pushed through country that offered no easy direction and no comfort for mistakes. Yet that same movement eventually took him to a larger dam, a place with cleaner water and a better chance of scraping together one more week, then one more after that. Survival stories love one defining moment, but real endurance is usually built from dozens of ugly, uncertain choices that only look wise in hindsight. There's another part people miss when they picture this kind of ordeal. Solitude isn't just emotional. It becomes physical. No one checks your injuries. No one tells you when you're thinking clearly and when you're not. No one notices if your words stop making sense because there's nobody there to hear them. A person alone has to be his own witness. Ricky had to judge his own limits, his own food, his own shelter, his own chance of lasting through one more day. That kind of isolation can hollow out a person or sharpen him into something spare and focused. Maybe both happened. Maybe some mornings he woke with purpose and others with nothing but habit. Maybe he argued with himself out loud, just to hear a voice. Maybe the silence became so familiar that when rescue finally came, human conversation felt strange. The nights were their own trial. Heat leaves the ground in slow breaths. The sky opens up, huge and indifferent, full of stars that look close enough to touch and too far away to matter. In that dark, a little shelter can feel both precious and pathetic. Precious because it's yours. Pathetic because you know exactly how little stands between you and everything outside it. Wind nudges at the edges. Insects carry on with their own business. Sleep comes in pieces. You wake at every noise. Then remember there is no one out there coming to help. At least not yet. A man can start measuring life in tiny comforts then. A dry place to lie down. Water within reach. A stomach that isn't completely empty. Morning itself becoming a reward. But the longer he lasted, the more dangerous a new thought became. What if nobody was looking? That question changes the chemistry of hope. At first it sounds impossible. Surely someone notices. Surely family, police, a passing truck, somebody. Then the numbers start working against you. Australia is huge. Remote country doesn't search itself. If your location isn't known, absence becomes harder to solve than people think. Ricky later said his family didn't realize right away how badly something had gone wrong. By the time concern sharpened into alarm, the area he could have been in was vast beyond comfort. Out there, a missing person can become less a point on a map than a question dropped into a continent. Once that understanding took hold, quiet endurance may have been the only thing left to him. Not confidence, not certainty, just the refusal to die before chance finally swung his way. And still, chance didn't hurry. Week after week, he lived near water, scavenged for survival food, and watched his energy drain. He found ways to ration effort, because waste could kill him as surely as hunger. One trip too far in the wrong direction. One afternoon too exposed to the sun. One bad decision made while dizzy. The body doesn't forgive much in that country. He later said that near the end he stopped expecting rescue every day. That line says a lot. There's a brutal shift when hope changes from active to quiet. You stop listening for engines every minute. You stop imagining the exact conversation you'll have when help arrives. You focus on making it through the next night. Some people would call that giving up. It wasn't. It was something harder. It was hope stripped of fantasy, still breathing, still small, still there. Then came the day everything changed. and it didn't arrive with thunder. No dramaticabili. No flare shot into the sky. Just the ordinary movement of station hands out doing routine work near Berindadu cattle country. Somewhere near his humpy, Ricky heard a vehicle. After all that time, after all those false starts in his head, there were real people moving through the land within reach of him. Imagine the confusion in that moment. Do you trust your ears? Do you conserve strength? Do you run toward the sound on legs that barely feel like yours?